We're so excited to be here this afternoon with all of you. And I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Blessing and the whole Mother Honestly team. The community that you guys have built is just truly incredible, and we're really grateful to be part of it today. As Kristen mentioned, I'm Merahn Hobbs. I'm the very proud and sometimes very tired mother of a 5-year-old daughter and 2-year-old son. And from that standpoint, for everyone who's joining us in the audience this afternoon, I just want to say a huge thank you to you as well, because we all know that as parents, you have many ways you could be spending this Friday afternoon, some of which are in your control and some of which, as mentioned just now, are not. And we're just very grateful for your time and that you're here. So as Kristen also mentioned, in addition to being a mom, I'm also the head of brand at Vivvi. And so I'll give a brief intro on us and then introduce our amazing panelists this afternoon. So at Vivvi, we are reinventing childcare and early learning for today's families. And we're doing that in a number of ways. So on our campuses in New York, nationwide through our in-home program, which you'll hear more about through my colleague, Lauren Knobbe, who's joining us, our Care Credits program and virtual tutoring platform, and most importantly, probably by working with employers to increase access and affordability to quality care by providing childcare as a benefit to their employees. So if you're here and you're interested in this topic, you are all too familiar with the devastating impact that COVID has had on childcare and how broken the system has been for years before that. So I won't bore everyone with the million statistics that we've probably been talking about all day. But to me, I think this panel and innovation in general is all about positivity. So we're going to try to flip the script this afternoon and look forward. And we have 3 leaders across 3 different companies tackling very different aspects of innovation through accessing, delivering, and paying for care that are here. And so I want to introduce Lauren, Sarah, and Stephen. And I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves. And with that, I think they'll introduce who they are and what they do. But additionally, I think education and childcare are typically relatively linear paths. Many teachers and many administrators think of it as a calling and are in this industry for life. But each person on this panel is kind of coming at it from a different angle. So I think that's also a really interesting aspect of how we're going to talk about it this afternoon. And so I'd love for, as they introduce themselves, as you introduce yourselves, to talk a little bit about your background and how that allows you to innovate in your role and why you chose to work in this space.
I can start.
Go for it.
All right.
Hey.
I'm Sarah Moskoff. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Winnie. Winnie is a marketplace for finding childcare and early education. We started it now almost 6 years ago. And I got into childcare kind of by accident. I had children and realized as a parent how challenging it was, especially for me to be a working mother. Now we all see the impact of not having childcare on mothers in the workplace, but at the time it was sort of like an unspoken thing that mothers were balancing a lot of this kind of invisible labor. And so I teamed up with this woman I was working with, who is now my co-founder, and we realized there was just an opportunity to solve problems for parents, especially mothers, and use technology to do so. And that was kind of where Winnie was born. And we realized one of the biggest problems we could solve for parents was around childcare. It's this essential need, and if you don't have it, you can't do anything else. And so that was what led me into the space, was really just my own need.
Great. Stephen, do you want to go?
Sure. First of all, I'm so grateful for a chance to be here. My name's Stephen Merahn. I'm a pediatrician by training, but probably more important, I'm the father of 4 and the grandfather of 2. So the issue of childcare has been prevalent in my life for a very, very long time and remains so as I try to help my older children navigate their own lives and find their own balance. I'm the chief medical officer at a company called Elemi, formerly Sprout. We're looking at how we can help families who have children with behaviors of concern find the diagnostic and treatment modes that work best for them. Our model is a hybrid of in-person and tech-supported care. There's a certain amount you can do with technology, but there's a certain amount of human interaction that requires when you're managing children with special needs. And we found that putting that balance together is probably going to allow access for a significantly greater number of families. Our focus right now happens to be on children with autism spectrum disorder and their families, largely because early intervention in autism care really can change the developmental trajectory for a child. So we're focusing on a particularly critical need in the marketplace right now. There is a significant workforce challenge around the diagnosticians and clinicians who are able to do therapy, and families are in particular need in that regard. But broader, my career began. I don't practice medicine in the classic sense of pediatrics. I was very fortunate early in my career, my pediatric career, to have spent some time at the Bank Street College of Education and learned a lot about early childhood education, and ended up, as a result of that, networking my way to become the medical director for the Bureau of Daycare for the New York City Health Department. And in that role, I found myself as the only physician among 45 absolutely brilliant, deeply experienced early childhood educators who are running the licensing and enforcement division for New York City, over 100,000 children under our care. And I have to say, ever since then, I've kind of had one foot in the pediatric world and one foot in the early childhood world. So I'm really grateful for the chance to be here.
Thank you.
And hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Knobbe. I am on the Vivvi team as the general manager of in-home programs. Prior to working at Vivvi, I started my career in the education space as a teacher, where I actually saw the compounded impact of accessibility and quality of education for kids starting as early as babies, and have spent majority of my career in innovative education spaces. Most recently, prior to Vivvi, working for the largest network of charter schools in New York City, building and expanding schools, really focused on how to bring quality and accessibility to folks of all different backgrounds and socioeconomic levels. And at Vivvi, now we're really working on how to bring high quality care and learning to families in an accessible, affordable, and flexible way that really meets our families where they're at. Vivvi was really born out of building high quality daycare centers. And during the pandemic, we obviously saw the need for flexible options. And that's where the in-home product was built, where we bring quality care providers and educators into the homes of families on flexible schedules. And so really excited to be here and talk about innovation, how we're thinking about these problems flexibly, and really how it does start all the way at the littlest ages of kids, and how that impacts them for many, many years, and also how it impacts just the success and mental health of our parents too, to have those options. So super excited to be here, and excited to be joined by these panelists.
Awesome. So let's kick off by, I think, everyone mentioned the three, what I think of as sort of fundamental aspects of what we're all solving for, and in the childcare space. And those are accessibility of care, quality of care, and affordability. So I'd love for each of you to speak to one or two of these components and what you think the path forward is, either for your business, but also sort of more broadly in the space. So Stephen, let's start with you.
Well, so I have to say, the issue of accessibility is really a critical one. And we talk a lot about the involvement of employers in supporting the care of working parents in particular. But in fact, in healthcare, employer driven services has not worked out particularly well. And I'm taking an incredibly idealistic view here, which is we have a social imperative for fundamental education, literacy. We want people to read, we want people to use numbers, we want people to have some basic science literacy. Whether we've succeeded in that is a whole other story, but there is a social imperative for that. The data is very clear that we need to rethink our social imperative around early childhood education. And the fact that we have not committed to early childhood education as a social imperative reflects a fundamental bias in society, which is unconscious and often unstated, but really is designed to resist women fulfilling their potential in community. And when I say in community, people who want to work should work. People who want to have ambitious, outrageous, smash glass ceiling careers should, and people who don't shouldn't have to. But at the same time, you should be able to have a fulfilling balance in your life. And putting children into care as young as infants and toddlers has been demonstrated to be in their best interest from the perspective of developmental appropriateness. If you look at research like the Perry Preschool Project, which has now gone on for 50 years, the idea of early childhood education, and there are still people out there who still resist this idea and have this, again, unconscious and often conscious bias, that women should not necessarily have the same opportunity in the workplace as men do. And so the fact that we've got to appeal to the employer market as we have in healthcare. And by the way, at the same time, healthcare, a healthy community, healthy individuals, health in general allows us to have a much more successful and robust economy. So, I look at the affordability issue through that lens right now. Now, the other side of it is the side of what is quality. And by the way, the same issue happened with home-based care, whether it's family daycare where you take your child to someone else's home, or whether you're actually doing in-home care, as we're seeing with the Vivvi model. The fact is, the idea of setting standards of what is developmentally appropriate practice really becomes the critical success factor. And the final comment I'll make here, and I'll give up the floor, is early childhood education remains in a silo, often very distanced from the other people who share the care of children. And my profession in particular is terrible at collaborating with the early childhood community. And we continue to look at early childhood education as daycare, where just about everybody who works in the early childhood community has extensive training. I did training for Head Start for a long time. I would trust my child with a Head Start para more than I would with some people who are providing, unlicensed daycare. So the issue of quality is not even so much an issue of professional licensure or certification. It's a question of commitment to developmentally appropriate practice. And with that, I'll get off my soapbox for a minute. Lauren.
Oh, you're muted.
Lauren, I think that's a great segue to some of the things that we're doing with recruiting and thinking about how to treat teachers differently. So I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah. So, when we think about accessibility at Vivvi, it's a few prongs. It's around how do we make the product accessible from a price point, also accessible and flexible to where parents actually are and where they need care. And then the last component, which Stephen just hit on, is what does it look like to actually support daycare providers, educators, all of those folks, and really have a vision of what excellence looks like. When I think about accessibility too, I think what drives us towards innovation is that the system is not working right now. It's not serving all families in the ways that they need. And these children are growing, right? So one day loss for them can never be brought back. They can't wait years for the system to fix itself. And so, at Vivvi, when we're thinking about supporting our teachers, it's around what do our lessons and our engagement and our curriculum look like? How are we building robust lesson plans and activities that are really developmentally focused and supporting families and teachers? But there's also another key component that we've been thinking about at Vivvi, which is really a differentiator for us, is how we are partnering with employers to make early childcare and learning accessible for families. And so we work with employers to build corporate partnerships where employers are helping to subsidize the cost and to make these opportunities available for their families. And at Vivvi, what we've also seen, as many companies have over the past year, is that parents need options, they need flexibility. And so that's really driven us to think about those offerings. How do we make ourselves available in the places where families need us, whether that's high quality center care, in-home care, backup care, virtual tutoring, and really thinking creatively around what are parents telling us they need to make it actually accessible and usable to them, and not just giving a one size fits all approach, while also balancing that with what role do employers play and how can we actually make an impact today and not wait multiple years for the system to catch up or government policy, because our kids and families just don't have the time to wait.
Yeah, I think that's a really, yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say that's really one of the thesis we founded Winnie on was like, all parents need something different. And I think that's never been more true as now in this post-COVID world where we're working from home or the office sometimes, or we now live in the suburbs and we don't all live in major cities. And it's really hard to find all the options that exist. I mean, there needs to be more options, more and better options for sure. But there's actually a lot out there. There's, hundreds of thousands of licensed group childcare providers that provide all different sorts of things. And it was just hard for parents to even know what their options are, including, incredible Head Start programs that are free and some of the highest quality programs in the country and completely free for lower income families. And so, that was just kind of the reason we started Winnie was like, let's just have a place on the internet where parents can at least know what's out there. And of course, we hope to do a lot more than that. But that was the starting point. Is like, let's just help parents discover everything that exists.
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting. I mean, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your tech background too. And I think when we started this, and are thinking about all the different people that it takes to solve these issues, it really is. It's the actual caregivers, the actual teachers, it's the leaders who are trying to adjust policy and to think through how do you make, real strategic change. And it's also, how do you build the algorithms to even like get to parents, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about, once people find Winnie, then it's this avenue for finding childcare, but how are you telling parents about Winnie? How are you gaining accessibility for parents that are underserved, even as far as like learning about these new platforms?
Yeah, I mean, the crazy thing for us when we started and we were kind of figuring out what we were going to build to help parents was we realized like parents were going to Google and they were just searching like daycare near me or like best preschools in my city. And there was, not a lot that showed up because childcare providers were not, they don't, over half of them didn't even have a website. And that, your ability to put up a great website isn't an indication of the quality of the kind of care you provide. These are very different skill sets. I can make a great website, but it's questionable what kind of quality of care I provide to my children. And so we just found like literally just by aggregating all this information and putting it on the internet, making the stuff in the licensing database available and accessible to parents, they could suddenly see like, is this provider actually licensed? And do they have citations and violations of that license that I should know about? Just really basic stuff that you would have expected was already on the internet, but it wasn't. And it wasn't at scale. And I think definitely having a tech background and, having built products at Google and Twitter and seeing that like the internet is a very powerful tool when you can do things at scale certainly helped. I wanted to bring some of the engineers I was used to working with through my career to the parenting space, which I think now we're starting to see more startups and talent in the space for sure. But like when we started 6 years ago, there was nothing.
Yeah. It's a really interesting, my background is in hospitality, and I think it's a similar kind of wave of tech support, to Stephen's point too. It's like building tech underneath these things to support and to broaden, not to deliver the actual care, because anyone who's had a child knows that a robot cannot take care of that child, unfortunately, sometimes.
But I think that's, it's a really important point. Sarah's background is in many ways exemplary of the kinds of forward thinking that we need to bring, because often you find that people within a discipline, whether it's early childhood education or, again, in my case, in medicine, we think we understand these outside disciplines like tech, and we really don't. And the more that we're willing and open to allow people to come in with a model that may actually improve the way that we're providing services and enhance the experience of the people that we're caring for, and then sometimes even extend our discipline-based capabilities into the tech space, this kind of mashup really becomes really important.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think so. I mean, to switch gears a little bit beyond sort of the fundamentals of what's broken and what we all set out to do, either in our companies or in our careers to fix these issues. I think the past 2 years has taught everyone that we need to be listening as much as possible to what's going on, because things, obviously for working parents, but also with the companies that are supporting those working parents, is changing by the minute, by the day, with different restrictions, different schedules. And to your point, Sarah, like people need different things on a weekly basis, then they also need different things during the week. So I'd love for each of you to think about, how different aspects of what you're trying to do, have you pivoted based on what you're hearing from parents, and just in general what you're hearing from parents, because I think the other thing that we say a lot in building what we're building is don't worry alone. And I think for all of the parents out there who are interested and worried about this topic, you are not alone. I work in childcare, and I also worry about my childcare situation every single day. So it's a tenuous balance. So I'd love to know, what everyone is hearing and how they're pivoting based on that.
Why don't you go, Lauren?
Yeah, go for
Sure,
it.
I can go first. Yeah, I mean, I think in this idea of like the don't worry alone, I think our role is to really understand what parents need and to work as hard as we can to think about creative ways to deliver that. And, I mentioned this a little bit before, but we've heard from parents, especially in these pandemic times, this like great tension between the need for flexibility, for reliability, but also concerns around health and safety and concerns around socialization. So parents are making decisions between, group care or individual care, and really trying to understand what are the impacts that might have on their child's development, as well as just their pocketbook at the end of the day. And so the role we're really trying to play is thinking of ourselves as like an omni-channel offering where folks have a menu of options and can think about what is the right combination of care that they need. For example, in New York City, we have our centers, our care and learning centers, our in-home programs are running, virtual tutoring, backup care. And so we have families that are doing a lot of hybrid programs with us. And so we're learning alongside them, how do we be nimble to really share the experience with our families? And then beyond that, what we have to think about too at Vivvi is, just the management of childcare. It can be a lot. And so how do we really alleviate that administrative work off of the shoulders of parents? What can we do to really bring that and to use our ability to scale, to think about that creatively for them, right? Because anyone who's had a nanny knows that there's payroll, there's W-2s, there's kind of the whole kit and caboodle of figuring that piece out. And so we've been really working on how do we make sure that that's as easy as possible for parents, and we're bringing that in-house and doing it for them. So we don't have the magic bullet, I wouldn't say, but really taking our cue from parents and understanding what do they need and how can we serve them as flexibly as possible.
And I think something else that I think probably translates to LME as well is looking more holistically at a family rather than, I think many schools and programs, and certainly privatized care like a nanny or a babysitter, is really solely focused on the child. And to really to pull back and think more holistically about the parents that are a part of that family and leading that family and supporting them so that they can show up as their best selves when they're with their children, and so that they can have the care that they need to balance their lives is something that's a big differentiator for us. And just in thinking about, listening to parents and how much support they need, from, advice about potty training and sleep training to mental health, and just having a community to be a part of. And so that's something that we've really focused on, especially during COVID and in the past year and a half, is trying to create as many opportunities for connection and learning for parents as well as children, as what children are getting every day.
One of the biggest insights I think families got from the COVID experience was the fact that just because you're working from home doesn't mean your child does not need to continue to have childcare. And in fact, in many ways, a working from home parent does not necessarily have the time or attention while they're working, even though they may be home, to give the child the developmentally appropriate experiences that are going to continue to facilitate that child's development. Nowhere was this more evident in the children with special needs category, whether it was behavioral developmental disorders. Parents rely on those services to help their children sustain their developmental trajectory. And the fact that they were stopped and that the parents didn't necessarily have the therapeutic skills. I mean, you can interact with your child. I mean, the good news, the good news about whatever happens is, child development proceeds whether the child's on lockdown for COVID or not. And they're still going to explore their world and they're still going to be curious. The experiences may be different. They may not be digging in the dirt, but they're kind of looking at the crevices between the couch. And by the way, those are equivalent developmental experiences. Don't discount one over another. As long as the child is interacting with their environment, they're going to have those developmental experiences and it will feed them. So I think that's something we can, give parents positively. But you talked a little bit about socialization. You talked a little bit about the extension of the child's environment. But certainly for children who who were developing challenges and didn't get the diagnostic support they need for early intervention, or for children who had a diagnosis and for whom therapy was either stopped or delayed, the challenges to families are severe. And we know that the consequences of not finding that support network for families can not just have an effect on the child, but can have an effect on that whole family's functions.
Yeah, completely. We're getting a few questions from the audience, so I might do a couple of those and then we can shift back. So first off, what is the difference between Vivvi and care.com? This might have been answered by Lauren, but in the last few minutes, but care.com is a marketplace providing connections to various caregivers. Vivvi actually owns and operates schools and employs teachers and caregivers ourselves. So we have on-campus care, we have in-home care, which is actual our employees and our curriculum delivered in your home, and then virtual tutoring and backup care. So I hope that answers that question. But we're also going to be in the room doing a chat afterwards. So you were welcome to reach out to us there as well. So another question from the audience. If we're going to change childcare to make it more affordable and accessible, what can we do as parents to make a better future? And I'll open that up to
vote.
Anyone. Yeah. Vote. And I would say, I think there's the government standpoint, and then there is if you are working at a company, voice your concerns, join your ERG, connect with other parents and make your voice heard, because I think one of the most shocking things, not shocking maybe, but hard things is that how many companies don't understand the real needs of their working parents. And if they don't understand, they can't help you. So I think as many people as can voice these issues, and not just their own issues, but what it does to their team, what it does to their boss, the people that report to them. It's not just the working parents in the workforce that this affects. So I think being as vocal as you can in any channel that you can, and banding together if you need help and asking for that help is
there's part of it is learning to speak the language of the employer. And you can get some help with that. So there's a network of organizations in Texas called Early Matters. There's one in Houston, there's one in Dallas, and there's one in Austin. And Early Matters is an employer coalition, and it's an employer coalition not so much in terms of we're employers and we're going to pay. It's we're employers and we believe in this, and that's so. In fact, they have message points that you can use with employers, not just to say, oh, we need the support for affordability, but we need you to believe in why this is important for the business as well as for the community that we're a part of.
Yeah. Another question, probably geared towards Stephen. So for people who have children who have special needs, what childcare suggestions do you have when traditional childcare might not be an option?
So there's two emerging ideas, and one is an old one that we just need to rediscover. The old one that we need to rediscover is it may not be one person that takes care of your child all day, or it may not be a traditional center. It may be that you have a series of rotating individuals who come in for different interactions at different times. So you may have someone who comes in for a play experience, and someone who comes in for a more therapeutic experience, and someone who comes in and supports a socialization experience. And by the way, when you do it that way, costs kind of even out to the equivalent of one full-time experience. So you're basically you're using one FTE, but you're dividing into smaller pieces.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can cobble together care, but also care and therapy. The two that are newer, one is the idea that came up during the pandemic of pods, and finding other families of children who have other conditions or same conditions as your child, and jointly collaborating on bringing in a therapist or early childhood educators who can manage the pod on behalf of the whole family. And there's, so again, this is one of those magical breakthrough ideas that I think we need to now nurture a little bit. The seed got planted around these smaller centers. I think back to one-room schoolhouses and communities. That's the equivalent, by the way, in many ways, of what that is. And then the third is tech-enabled. And there are ways for you to get, and there's all sorts of questions about tech interaction with early childhood. And we're not going to go down that path right now because the jury's out and there's lots of data on both sides, so we're not going to debate that. But if you are comfortable with tech experiences in early childhood, there are ways that you can use technology. Now, I would encourage more human-based tech, meaning there's a person on the end, as opposed to an asynchronous experience. But at the same time, also, there's tech for you as parents, for you to learn. And again, we're talking specifically about children who need therapies of different types. There's tech for you to be able to acquire treatment plans and care plans that would allow you to therapeutically interact with your child. Now, it doesn't replace the therapist, but it certainly can serve as a bridge until you can find the right therapeutic resources.
Yeah. Also, we have a number of licensed group childcare providers on Winnie who absolutely take children with special needs. And it's actually a piece of data we collect. You may also have a lot of luck with licensed home-based providers. Home-based providers are kind of used to caring for a mixed age group of kids, and they have a smaller number of children in care, and so they can be more flexible. Now, obviously, depends on your situation and the kinds of needs, but you might be surprised. I mean, childcare providers are just some of the most empathetic, caring individuals that I've come across, and they have to, they're working with young children. They have to be really flexible. Young children have a lot of needs, whether they're special needs or not. And so definitely inquire. I wouldn't write off traditional group childcare because it can be an amazing experience for everyone when there's children kind of all different needs in care together.
Another question on accessibility, and I think Sarah, maybe you can start with this, but question says, we are struggling so much, and so much is in caps, I feel you, to find care in our area. We've tried nannies and daycare centers to no avail. What suggestions do you have for families who can't find quality and affordable care?
Check out Winnie.
Go to winnie.com.
This is my saying. I hear nannies and I hear daycare centers, but I'm not hearing that you looked at licensed home-based providers. And these are just such an untapped resource. They're, over half of the providers that exist. And they're typically, there's typically one right down the street from you that you just don't know about because they don't have a big sign outside their house. So really, the only place to find them is in the licensing database or on Winnie. They typically don't have websites, but they're licensed and inspected in every state, and there's a variety of regulations depending on your state. So I would encourage you to check them out. But it is hard. I'm not gonna lie. We need more incredible high quality providers in the field, and that is a big reason I do what I do.
Yeah. I mean, similarly, I think, our in-home program is trying to take that burden off of families and help with, we do all of the sourcing, all of the vetting, and all of the search so that you don't have to. So if you are, I don't know where exactly this person is, but, please check out Winnie and reach out to our in-home team on vivvi.com/in-home. And we can likely help you. So another sort of more broad question, which I think is really interesting, how can supply demand be recalibrated?
Yeah, it's
We could probably close this one.
it's really, we see this like in our data. We see where there's lots of parents searching and not a lot of supply, and then vice versa. We see where all these providers are listing open spaces and no parents are searching. It is frustrating. And I think there's just a huge imbalance. It's just not the case that there isn't enough supply. The problem is the supply that exists is not being well matched to the demand. And it is something that I think technology can definitely help with. Because it is a tricky problem that can't be solved by just humans, but it's a huge challenge.
Yeah, I think go ahead.
Yeah, I can jump in here. I think to echo Sarah, it is a huge challenge, and there are tremendous amounts of demand right now, especially. And something interesting in the pandemic that we've seen is folks moving around the country. And so huge influxes of families to certain markets where just wasn't infrastructure before. So huge wait lists, and just the supply is much lower because the population has grown so quickly. One way that we're really trying to solve that is by pairing families up. And so really thinking about getting more folks working with the same Vivvi educator. So that's one way that we're just thinking about kind of getting folks what they need on the most flexible basis possible. But I agree with Sarah. I think like utilizing technology, and then, hopefully we continue to move in a path in terms of policy and funding as a country where more resources are being put in these places to make it more lucrative and interesting for folks to devote their lives here. I do think one thing that is exciting is there are still so many people that are committed to this despite the health concerns over the last year and a half and how difficult this work can be. So there are folks who really view this as their passion. They love working with young children. It's all they want to do. But it's our role as providers in this space to think creatively. It's our employers' roles to make it more accessible for families. And then it's our government's role too to make it a priority.
Yeah, I think to Sarah's point about in-home daycares, and then to Lauren's point about pairing families, like a nanny share model, which we do a lot with Vivvi in-home. It is really amazing to think about the added affordability and the added socialization and the ease of managing the care if you can work with another family or another few families. And it's just a very powerful combination that I think is really shifting the game for many families, and can be done more. And I think the nanny share model and these types of things are more popular in certain cities like DC, for instance, where everyone has to pay on the books, and so it's just more of a type of care that people are familiar with. But we're seeing it pop up in other cities like Austin or like Richmond, where many people have moved, and they need community, they need camaraderie in finding their care, paying for their care, and executing on it. So really encourage families to think about that, and to think about who they know, or use Facebook, use local listservs, and just get together and help each other, because it really does improve the quality and affordability. Another question are there more towards the data? This person is asking to look at childcare holistically, care and support and education for parents. Are there case studies on the results of this that can help in advocating for funding it? This is a really good question. I'm going to put a couple links in the chat of one, a caregiving playbook that we just put out, as well as a case study on one of our clients. I'll also recommend, we work with a woman named Lauren Smith Brody, who wrote a book called The Fifth Trimester that has unbelievable data. And I think there's a few other, Rashma Shujani spoke earlier, I think today in this panel, and there are many, many resources, but I think there can certainly be more. And I don't know, Sarah or Stephen or Lauren, if you have additional resources that you'd like to recommend.
Not so much recommend, but the fact is there is, the data is available. That's one of the sad facts of the policy environment that we find ourselves in and I want everybody to be armed with it. So it's not, no one can ever say to you, we need more studies. We don't need more studies. We know that parent engagement works. We know that parent involvement works. We know that collaborative care between the early childhood community and the medical community works. And we know that, developmentally appropriate early childhood experiences out of the home are absolutely good for children. And so the data is around, and how we organize it. And there's a number of sources. There's something called the Early Childhood Connector, a new web platform that's been put up, again, largely by that group that's been doing Early Matters in Texas. But you can, the data is accessible, and part of what we might be able to help with is, as Lauren just said, let's get you the resources like the caregiving playbook.
All right, we have a few more minutes. I'd like to end on a very positive note, because I think there's been so much amazing information in this. So just to go around the room one more time, and I'd love for each person to say one thing that you're truly excited about, or a solution that the audience could use or share with a fellow working parent today, right after this panel. Sarah, why don't you go first?
I'm just super excited about all the energy and enthusiasm for the childcare space. It was really just not like this 6 years ago. There were no startups working on anything, no funding in the space, and we still need a lot more. But it's exciting that there's conferences like this and all these companies that are innovating. It makes me really hopeful and optimistic that we're at least bringing some of the innovation and the great kind of advances that technology can bring, and finally bringing them to childcare and education.
I'm going to say that one of the positive outputs of the pandemic is that we are now very much, and we cannot deny that the power of family is critically important for the success of our economy. And the needs of working moms in particular have been escalated to national and community-based dialogue. And I think in the long run, that's going to be very positive for families.
And I would just close this out by saying I'm really excited and energized by the opportunity just to play a role in families finding great childcare. There's truly not a better feeling in the world than getting positive feedback from a family that they love the person they're working with, they feel like their child is taken care of, and it's just very exciting to hear, Sarah's story, Stephen's story around connecting families with providers that really do make that difference. And so excited for us all to see where it can go, and excited that we're talking about it.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, as Stephen said, and I think everyone, the visibility on working parents has never been greater. And I'll say, in a forward-looking note too, that if you are one of the over 2.5 million women who left the workforce in the last 2 years, all three of our companies and many companies in the childcare space are hiring. And so check us out and come work with us to solve the problem and get free childcare while you're at it. I'll just make a plug for, checking out all of our career pages, and hopefully meeting all of you in person at some point. Please come visit us in the chat room. And I wish I could see everyone's faces right now, but I'm really happy to be here. And thank you to Kristen and Blessing and the whole Mother Honestly team.
Yeah.
See you soon.